Мене звати Данило Лубківський. Завершується насичений тиждень, багатий на міжнародні події. 15 червня Європейський Союз відкрив для України і Молдови перший переговорний кластер основи. Від політичної обіцянки членства переходимо до практичного вступу до Європейського Союзу. 15-17 червня відбувся саміт найвпливовіших у світі розвинених демократій Групи 7. Його особливість – змінюється політична мова, союзники відновлюють єдність. 18-19 червня – саміт Європейського Союзу. Серед головних тем – майбутнє розширення, спільна європейська оборона і ключова роль Європи у переговорах з Москвою. Саме ці теми ми обговорюємо у спеціальному форматі Київського безпекового форуму з нашими шановними гостями. Насамперед, посол Німеччини в Україні Heiko Thoms. Heiko, thank you very much for coming. Посол Франції Gaël Veyssière і голова Київського безпекового форуму Arseniy Yatsenyuk. Colleagues, thank you very much for joining us for this special event of the Kyiv Security Forum. Let me begin with Ambassador Gaël Veyssière of France. France currently holds the G7 presidency and has just hosted the summit of the world's leading democracies. Gaël, what are your impressions and conclusions from the summit? Did President Macron manage to temper President Trump?
I would certainly not say things like this, but for us it was a very important summit. It was an important summit because everybody was here. It was an important summit of G7 because there was a very important outreach. President Zelensky was here. Lots of leaders from the Middle East were here too. And it was an important summit because it addressed very important subjects. Geopolitical subjects, of course, Ukraine, Middle East, Iran, but also macroeconomic imbalances, which are core to the G7 identity and economic issues, and also some social issues. And at the end of the day, we got very interesting meetings, but we also go to G7 statements, not only a presidency or a chair statement, but G7 statement, which is very important, and many other statements more specialized. And then, as far as Ambassador of France to Ukraine, it was a very important summit because it enabled to have, bilateral meetings, of course, between President Zelensky, President Trump, and all of us, but also to have strong commitments from G7 leaders to support Ukraine, in particular for air defense, to raise pressure on Moscow and on Russia. And I think that it was very timely at the moment where we can see that the crisis in the Middle East is now solved because there is an agreement which has been signed yesterday night in Versailles, actually, by President Trump. That there is now it's high time we would focus again on a real important subject also, which is Ukraine. So I think it was timely and it enabled to make really a difference. So we have to work on this. French presidency will continue until the end of the year, mind you. So we still have lots of work ahead of us.
Wonderful. The G7 leaders actually have stated clearly that Russia will not win this war. And a settlement should be reached as soon as possible. In your opinion, how that could be achieved?
I think that there is more and more the view that we should focus on a ceasefire, a good ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, which is something that Ukraine has accepted for a long time now. Initially it was not the case, but Ukraine has accepted fully. And Russia opposes this. So I think that this is what we should try to get. Actually, the US are leading a key role into these discussions between Russia and Ukraine. It's going to continue, clearly. But we are here to support, and we do think it would be vital. It's also vital for us as European members, and I'm sure that Heiko would share the same view, because what happens in Ukraine is key for the security of Ukraine, but it's also key for the security of Europe. And as the security of Europe is concerned, it's key for us to be active players in this. Yeah.
Thank you, Gaël. And now I turn to Ambassador Heiko Thoms of Germany. Heiko, all of us were shocked by Moscow's strike on Kyiv-Pecherska Lavra. It seems to me that the French foreign minister said that this attack could be compared to something as unthinkable as bombarding of Notre Dame. I know your personal reaction was very strong. Russia is taking revenge on Ukraine. It has no respect for values, culture, or faith. It does not care about orthodoxy. It actually has never truly cared about orthodoxy. The attack on the Lavra felt like a bloody farewell to Ukraine's spiritual heritage. After crossing all these lines, does the outcome of the G7 summit give you confidence that we are capable of confronting and containing this evil?
It does, absolutely. But first, I'd really like to congratulate France on the very successful G7 summit. I think it was not only symbolically important, the substance really matters. And for me, as ambassador of Germany to Ukraine, of course, what I look at is first and foremost what it means for Ukraine. And I believe the outcome there is very positive. The language we have found on support for Ukraine, on air defense, on increased pressure on Russia is exactly what we needed at this point in time. Let me also say this is just the first step. We will be having another very important signal of support to Ukraine then today and tomorrow at the European summit. And then, of course, we are all working for, also Germany and France, very strongly together for a strong signal again at the NATO summit, which will happen in just a few days now, I could say, early July. So this is a very good sequence, and it shows what the momentum, or how the momentum is at this point in time. I think things are turning really into Ukraine's and Europe's favor. What regards the attack, this really terrible, cynical attack on the Lavra, and I have to say personally, I have hardly ever been more shocked in my life than after that attack. I'd just been to the Lavra on a personal, private guided tour a few days before when I was at the exact same spot that was attacked. For me, it's absolutely clear that this was a targeted attack. I don't believe in such coincidences that this part of the Lavra was attacked, that in this part of the Lavra, this particular building, the cathedral, was attacked. That cannot be a coincidence. That was a deliberate attack on Ukrainian identity, Ukrainian sovereignty, and Ukrainian independence. This cannot be left unsaid. And of course, it's part of a larger picture of attacks against Ukrainian cultural heritage and identity. When you see that also the Film Institute was attacked, that the museum in Kharkiv was attacked, that other cultural and religious institutions were attacked. So this is part of a bigger picture, and we have to clearly also mention that. We have to name it, and we have to see who the culprit is in this.
What's interesting that Chancellor Merz, who worked closely with President Macron to make this G7 summit a success, he actually, at the summit, he mentioned that Ukraine now stands on a new position of strength. What does it mean in practical sense?
Well, I believe you can see this on many levels. You can see it on the military field, and you see that Ukraine is now holding the line very successfully when you look at the front line proper. You also see that Ukraine has become very successful in what we call mid-strikes, so that Russian supply lines are also being attacked very successfully. This has already changed the dynamic, for instance, in Crimea. That's an interesting development. And of course, Ukrainian deep strikes, where, for instance, oil refineries are being struck in Russia. That also makes a difference. It's not only symbolic, too. It also has a very strong psychological effect, I believe, on the whole world, by the way. This is, in military terms, I believe, a good development, although we should not get ahead of ourselves. I also like to say that, because it's always a race, and we have seen technological advances on both sides. At this point in time, Ukraine has the technological edge, and that, of course, as such, is very positive, and we will keep Ukraine, we'll keep supporting Ukraine in this respect, because this is all the result of a good cooperation within Europe.
Thank you, Heiko. And now I turn to Arseniy Yatsenyuk. The situation in the war has changed. However, Putin still seems convinced that Russia is advancing and heading ahead towards some kind of their, vision, illusion of victory. In this context, how do you see the outcome of the G7 summit, and what kind of message has been sent from Paris to Moscow and all over the world after the meeting of the world leaders?
Well, Ambassador, first, thank you for very strong words of support for the Ukrainian people. And let me commend the French ambassador with an impressive G7 meeting. You did something unbelievable. And that's not what China and Russia actually expected. Everyone expected a kind of ruptures among the leading democracies. And you show to the entire world that you are still united, you are on the same page. And in my humble opinion, it's a kind of pivot towards an attitude of the US president to the Ukraine war. Due to the fact that we expect that MOU with Iran would be signed between the US and Iran, this will bring Ukraine back into the focus of US political establishment. And look at the numbers among the American voters. More than 70% of Americans still support Ukraine. And this directly plays into the hands of Ukrainians and to the free world. And I hope that the US administration have to be more forceful in actually trying to support Ukraine, not just with the verbal support, but with the deliverables that are needed for Ukraine. In terms of Putin, Danylo, that you asked, I don't see any kind of sign that Putin is eager to hold any kind of talks. And it's crystal clear. Look, when he reached out to Trump to congratulate him with his birthday, his message was very clear that he is ready to host President Zelensky in Moscow. So it means that he is ready to accept Ukraine's surrender. So he's playing this stupid fiddle that he is doing for at least 4 years. But after this G summit, much will depend on the actions. I commend our European friends. You actually delivered a huge package of support to Ukraine, 90 billion euros, 60 of which goes to Pearl program and to the supply of the weapon to Ukraine. So you're imposing new sanctions, and you managed to substitute the US support. And you managed to show to the entire world that you do really care about the future of the world and you really know how to support Ukraine. Whether this can change the calculus of Putin, yes, it can, but it depends on the number of issues. The first one is, once again, whether we have President Trump as a trump card. Because your chancellor was absolutely right saying that we're on the same team. So the thing is, whether President Trump is ready to wear the jersey that Chancellor Merz gave him as a birthday gift. So it all depends on our actions, on our joint actions. And the best way to push these negotiations forward is to do what Ukrainian military is doing.
That's important stuff. Arseniy, thank you. And now let's get back to another side of that issue, the European integration of Ukraine. Arseniy, if I'm not mistaken, you were among a few Ukrainian politicians who actually argued to have a thoughtful approach to Chancellor Merz's suggestion to have gradual, as they say, integration of Ukraine into the European Union. And this is some kind of action. And that's yet another answer to Putin, an answer to our security risks, to get Ukraine on board as quickly as possible. Don't you see any kind of risk in this type of selective or gradual integration of Ukraine?
Well, frankly, no. And you're absolutely right saying that I am among few, those who support this idea. But I believe that this is a very reasonable and smart idea. And let me elaborate on this. The first one is we will join the European Union only in case if we will manage to stop this war. And that's what we've been discussing already. The second issue is that I want to be very realistic. It is a bumpy road to join the European Union. And I wish to join the European Union as quick as possible. But the idea that has been delivered by Chancellor Merkel deserves the credit. Let me just rephrase it from the association membership to the progressive membership. But it's a kind of interim measure before the full-fledged membership. We need to get into the room. And the quicker we do it, the better it would be for the Ukrainian people. And we still have a political will in Germany, in France, and in another EU member states to make this possible. So we have to elaborate and to dig into the details, but let me once again reiterate. I believe that we have to execute this idea. maybe to rephrase, to add some kind of additional flesh to this idea, or red meat. And this would be an interim measure for the full-fledged membership of Ukraine to the European Union. And I hope our French friends are on the same bandwagon.
Yeah, that's actually my question. Gaël, what do you think about the overall process and in particular the opening of the negotiation cluster with Ukraine and Moldova, what is of particular
Thank you.
importance?
Well, we are very happy that actually la conférence intergouvernementale, the intergovernmental conference could meet and open the first cluster. The truth is that it's long overdue. It should have happened before. It was not possible for political reasons and because of Hungary at that time. Now it is possible, so we did it. The truth is that Ukraine did not waste any time because technical work had already begun, but still politically it was really a problem. So I'm very happy that finally the EU could do that and that now we can enter into the real, even more into the substance. And then, of course, we would like other clusters and chapters to be open as soon as possible. So there is a discussion now on what are the next steps and how to do this as quickly as possible in the framework of the EU accession rules and regulations. So I think it's a very symbolic, very important thing which happened last Monday on the 15th of June. So that was really, really great. This said, we also share the view or the general idea, which was expressed in such a brilliant way by Chancellor Merz, that actually it would be very important to give a political signal to Ukraine quite soon, maybe next year, about how to, to comfort them into this European path and to comfort them in front of all the reforms that we need to do, which is of course always challenging. As you said, Prime Minister, it's a bumpy road, but it has to be, and that's the way it has to be. There are different ways to do this, and certainly there are these German ideas. There are other ways to do this. So let's work on this. But I think it's important to keep the momentum, to keep the political signal, and to demonstrate also to Ukraine and to the Ukrainian people who are very sincerely pro-Europeans and who very sincerely want to join the EU, that actually we hear them and that as long as they are doing the necessary reforms, things are going to be okay and they will join the EU. And the sooner will be, of course, the better.
Thank you, Gaël. Heiko, the enlargement of the European Union, new developments within the European Union, all of them require the transformation of the European Union. But how to ensure that there is no any kind of secondary membership, some kind of discrimination within the European Union? What do you think about that?
Well, I think the answer is also to be found in Chancellor Merz's letter. Certainly, as far as Ukraine is concerned, if you read it, then you will see that the most important point in the letter is that we want Ukraine to be part of the EU as soon as possible. But we want full membership for Ukraine in the European Union as soon as possible. We believe that Ukraine's place is inside the European Union. This is where Ukraine belongs. Of course, this requires many steps along the way, a lot of work, the homework that has to be done here, because you have to do the necessary reforms, you have to implement EU legislation, you have to, the so-called acquis, so all the body of rules and regulations that the EU is made up has to be enacted here and has to be implemented. And as soon as this happens, Ukraine can enter. Let me just remind you that Ukraine requested membership in 2022. On average, after requesting membership, it took countries 8 years to join. But it's in your hands. As soon as you complete the work, you can be assured that we will be behind your full accession to the European Union, full stop. Secondly, on the way there, our offer was to give Ukraine the right to already participate in all EU bodies, the College of Commissioners, the summits, the ministerial meetings, the working groups, the Parliament, the courts, already before the work has been fully done. That's an additional opportunity. It's to you for the taking.
Thank you, Heiko. The very idea of the European Union membership of Ukraine gets back to many years ago, to 2014, to the Revolution of Dignity. And now I turn to Arseniy. You actually played a key role, together with other political leaders, in securing visa-free regime for Ukraine. I mean, the European Union visa-free regime for Ukraine, for the Ukrainians. So you know what this job is about. What do you think about the opening of the negotiation cluster, and what kind of challenges this stage brings to Ukraine, and what it requires from the Ukrainian authorities, Ukrainian government, and society to implement in order to reach the goal?
Well, you know, frankly speaking, it's a nasty job. It's not. It is a hard toil, you know, and it demands a very professional approach. So we need a very strong team. We need an integrity in the government, and we need a very strong political will. So here is the thing: President Zelensky has practically everything. He has the majority in the House. He has a clear-cut EU integration agenda, and he has our closest friends, I mean the European Union, who is ready to accept Ukraine. There are deliberations over the timing, whether Ukraine can join the EU on a fast track. And as the German ambassador just mentioned, so we applied in 2022. So we have another actually 4 years in the worst case scenario to join the European Union. In the best case scenario, it depends. It depends whether Ukraine is ready to meet all Copenhagen criteria, and actually a lot is in our hands. So to put it in a nutshell, it is a two-way street. On the one hand, Ukrainian authorities have to show that they are fighting like hell for Ukraine's EU membership. So the House has to pass the legislation which is needed. The government needs to be very professional and responsible. And on the other hand, Europeans have to retain this unity and unanimity in making Ukraine a member of the European Union. And as you've actually mentioned, a decade ago, practically no one believed that Ukraine could get a visa-free regime.
Sure.
But we are traveling without any kind of restrictions and without any kind of visas in the European Union. So we did it a decade ago. We're going to do it right now.
Hallelujah. The summit of the European Union is to devote much of its attention to the issue of defense. We hear increasing calls for the creation of a European Defense Union. Gaël, what do you think about that in practical sense?
Well, I think that the European Union made already a huge effort. You know, I've been posted in the EU, French permanent representation, 2 times in my life. And I remember a time 10 years ago where actually defense was something that was not discussed at all. We were discussing development, sometimes foreign affairs, but defense never. And it was a subject which was completely out of reach. Now it is at the core of what the European Union is trying to do, and rightly so. And the EU, which is also, it's true that sometimes we're a bit slow, but it's difficult, but it takes time. We have unanimity on many aspects. It's true, but we succeeded actually in creating wonderful programs, EDIP, SAFE, with lots of money, both for EU member states to increase their military capabilities and military efforts, but also to benefit directly to Ukraine. And I think we should continue in this regard. It is also clear that the tendency is that the American presence in Europe is not going to increase, to speak as a diplomat, and that we should take things into our own hands as much as possible, both nationally, both at the same time inside the EU, but also inside NATO, actually. And I think that there is this joint now awareness of this everywhere, both nationally, in the EU and in NATO. And we are working on this. The our American friends are telling us that we should do more, and in fact they are right. So we should take this into our own hands, and I think that this is precisely what we are doing. Last thing I wanted to mention, and because this was not completely a given, in the past it did happen that there were different views, very strong different views as far as defense would go in the EU and in NATO. It's not the case anymore. We managed the 2 organizations function very well together under the pressure of the war in Ukraine and the need to be a single front in this, in supporting Ukraine, which is huge, and it was definitely not the case 10 years ago. So I think we have a stronger hand than we used to do. Of course, we need to insist on this. We need to continue on this, and we also need that this would be completely reflected in the financial needs, financial framework that the EU will have to adopt for the next 7 years after the end of the current financial framework. So, of course, these are huge discussions ahead of us, and time is difficult, and financial issues are difficult, obviously. But still, the EU managed to take a long road into that direction, and I'm sure we should continue, and I think we will, because actually we have no choice, and it's a security issue for Ukraine, but also for us.
Right. Heiko, President Trump reportedly ordered to withdraw around 5,000 American troops from Germany in the perspective of 6 or 12 months. How would that affect the German and the European security?
Well, let me first say that I completely agree with Gaël, and for us, clearly, the order of the day is to strengthen the European pillar of NATO. And we take that order very seriously. That's what's happening. We are stepping up our efforts in the field of defense enormously. So Germany alone will triple its defense budget between 2022 and 2030. So we will be reaching the 3.5 plus 1.5% goal that has been formulated probably already in 2030, 2031 at the latest. We are stepping up our military efforts in every field. The European Union sometimes, may be seen as a bit slow and complicated, but if you look at what we have already achieved at this point in time, it's actually absolutely marvelous. It's sometimes overlooked because you hear the day-to-day noises about this little question, this other little question. But look at what we have done now. We have provided 60 billion military aid for Ukraine in 2026 and 2027 alone. We have the defense industry programs that Gaël has mentioned. We have the European Defense Fund. We have the Safe Loan Program. We have the European Peace Facility, big instruments to strengthen our European defense and to help others. Let me just mention here that at this point in time, all military aid to Ukraine comes from the EU, or from Europe. Of course, Norway and Britain are also very important actors. Either we provide financial aid to Ukraine so that your military can get stronger, or we provide European defense goods, and in the areas where we don't have those goods that are needed, we buy them for you. So everything that you see now in terms of military assistance, or say 99%, is coming from Europe. That's something I should really like to spell out here at this point in time.
Your presence here, together with Ambassador of France, is already a sign of strong unity between Paris and Berlin, and also with unity with London. What makes it even more important to have this European Atlantic unity around the solidarity with Ukraine. Paris, Berlin, and London are trying to shape some kind of negotiation team with Moscow. Lavrov says that after receiving the ambassadors, or his deputy received the ambassador of your countries, said that he actually does not recognize that, as he says, there is something new. Gaël, what do you think? What is the logic of having these talks with Moscow, and do you see any prospects or success ahead?
So I think what is really important, as we said before, actually part of what's happening in Europe now, part of what's happening in Ukraine is actually key for the security of Europe. So of course the Europeans must be there, and we must have this discussion for things which directly concern us and our security. So the important thing is that there would be a channel that could be activated if needed with Russia. So this is what is being prepared now, preparing a channel. But right now, what we have is a negotiating process which is led by the US, organized with Russia and Ukraine, and supported by European members or European partners, including, of course, UK. And inside this group, of course, the E3 plays historically a very important role. So this is the architecture. So we are not here to duplicate or to make some parallel complicated processes, but at the same time, it's vital for us that a channel would exist, that when we would need this, we would be able to engage actually with Russia on the basis of our own interest, but also on the basis of what we think is needed to support Ukraine.
Right. What we witness is a unity at the G7 summit. The NATO summit is approaching. Heiko, what do you think? Should we expect the same level of unity at the NATO summit in Ankara in July?
I would certainly think so. That's our expectation, that's our aspiration, that's what we are working for together. And I believe that there will be another very strong signal for, to Ukraine that our continued support can be counted on. Again, from the European side, when I talk about this European pillar of NATO, that's of course one of the topics that the NATO summit will be discussing, but also in terms of overall support to Ukraine. At this point in time, especially after this very successful G7 summit, no reason to believe that it will be otherwise. I'm actually looking forward to that summit. It's another opportunity to talk about air defense, and let's see what the result will be.
That's an interesting question. Gaël, what do you think? What do you actually expect from the upcoming NATO summit? Should we expect something new or something unknown?
We always have to expect something new and positive and unknown. What is very important too is that President Zelensky has been invited to the NATO summit in Turkey. So that's key, obviously, so that we can continue this discussion. We had in G7 into a different format. So we do think it's absolutely key. NATO has got a role to play, obviously, in this increasing of our defense efforts and our support towards Ukraine too, both with the EU and others. But it's important. I think what we are seeing now is a renewed dynamics. So it's very important. And the fact that we have this leaders rendezvous quite close is very good, because it enables us to keep the dynamics. And then, of course, the fact that it would happen in Turkey is actually quite important too. So I think there is a good opportunity here. It's important that we would seize it and that we would build on the dynamics which has been relaunched very visibly in Evian during the G7 summit.
I think it's really important to sometimes take a step back and see what a long way we have already come.
Yep.
If you look back to the meeting in the White House in February 2025, to the Anchorage meeting, even what we discussed here only last fall, and where the debate stands now, it's another world that we're in now. It's due to the change dynamics on the battlefield that we talked about before, but it's also a big political change that has happened. Ukraine is now being perceived very differently. When I look back to last year, say the Munich Security Conference in 2025, Ukraine was still being talked about, maybe wrongly, as a recipient of support and aid. This year, the Munich Security Conference, Ukraine was being talked about as a very strong actor and an essential element of the European security architecture. And this is the road we have taken. I believe that we will travel further on that road.
That's a great point, actually. Thank you, Heiko, for mentioning this. Now I believe this is the most important thing to do, not to waste time, not to lose time. Arseniy, summing up this important discussion full of nuances and important messages, what do you think? What should we expect? How should we get prepared for the upcoming NATO summit in Ankara? In terms of Ukraine, in the Ukrainian perspective.
Well, here's the thing. The good news is that what's happening right now in Ukraine and in Europe, that's not what Putin and President Xi expected last year. They had completely different calculus. And not only Putin and Xi, and some of our friends from the other side of the big and beautiful ocean. The second one is look at the final statement, joint statement of the G7. They haven't mentioned any negotiations in this statement, and they did it right, because otherwise Putin will buy it as a kind of some gesture that Europeans and the G7, they are begging him for negotiations. They deliberately omitted this language. The third issue is that we expect that the NATO summit won't be any kind of another roller coaster in this geopolitics. That this NATO summit would be similar to the G7 meeting, because we need to express the unity, and NATO plays a crucial role in managing support to Ukraine. So, to put it in a nutshell, situation is much better than our adversaries expected, and we are on the right track. We will win this war. But it all depends on our joint actions. So I am very positive. And thank you for our French and German friends for your very staunch and strong support, even despite the fact that you all have your own domestic political cuisine, and well, we do understand the way the democracy works, but you deserve the credit. Thank you.
Excellencies, I would like to thank you very much for this splendid conversation. Thank you very much for the efforts of your governments. Thank you very much for your solidarity with Ukraine. We highly appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting us.